Welcome everybody to class 3. I've been checking with people and they've been able to see the screen so far. So glad to hear that. We're going to keep going. One note for those, I know Mac clients cannot see the web projector, for instance, and we've had problems in all the previous classes where some of the people, the screen goes green all of a sudden and we can't get away. Starting today, these are live streamed on YouTube. So if you get to that point where you just can't see anything, you can either find the link in the Intro to MREs channel in the MRE Discord, or I've also added it to the description for this class if you go into the event. So if you get to a point where you just can't see it and we can't recover it, you can go there. You can type in questions during the question and answer sessions in the live stream there, and we've got a few people helping. Merlin and I think it's Dragoness are going to be relaying the questions, so we'll be able to get questions from there into here as well. So, all right, we're gonna get this by the end of the class, hopefully, or by the end of the 5th class. I think we'll have it so everybody can see what's going on consistently. So, let's see how this goes. So, all right, today we're going to be going over actors in detail. Part of this is going to be finishing up last week's class. I'll be going over the slides that I didn't get to last time. They were posted already, so if you've looked at the slides I posted last week, you've seen them already, but I'll be talking through them today as well. But really we'll be going through a good bit on actors themselves, since that's the main things you do with MREs. You create actors, you control actors, you move them, rotate them, all sorts of stuff like that. So we're going to, the agenda here, going to remind everybody about the final project. We'll be going through a good bit of samples today, as you see. I'll be popping in and out of code quite a bit. Sometimes the code will be on the screen here. Sometimes I'll pull up my editor, but we're really getting into the meat of it here. We do have still a decent number of slides, but it's moving more to the code base. And I'll be posting the code after each class as well, so everybody has a chance to review it as well. All right, the final projects. Again, everybody, please come up with an idea for a final project, something you can show off to all of AltSpace. I think it'll be a lot of fun if we can get a good bit of people to create an MRE, create a world. If it makes sense to customize the world a little bit for the MRE, it's great. If not, just one of the standard ones works well. And just be there to talk about it and have an hour set aside to where anybody in AltSpace who's interested can come and see your MRE, ask you about it, talk about how you did it, things like that. I think that'll be a lot of fun. I know I'm looking forward to going to everybody's world. So please come up with a project, and looking forward to seeing what everybody is. All right, so now we're getting into the slides. This is the tail end of last week's presentation. This create from library call at the front, that's the one we showed last week. That's creating an actor from a kit item. There are a variety of other ways you see here to actually create actors inside the MREs. You can create them from a GLTF. The GLTF can be hosted pretty much anywhere on the internet. Try this here, there we go. One of the nice things though is that AltSpace provides you a way to host them on its site itself. So even if you don't have your own web server, you have a GLTF, if you go into the model section there, you can upload a GLTF and then get the link to use and create from GLTF. The next one here, it's load GLTF and create from prefab, that combination here. It's very similar to create from GLTF, the previous one. In fact, if you look at the documentation for create from GLTF, you see it as in a row. So the main reason you want to do this is, for instance, if you want to create a lot of copies of the same GLTF. I don't know how many of you have been to my moon world, where as soon as you enter, there's a space helmet on your head. An MRE adds that. That space helmet is a GLTF. The load GLTF call lets me load that GLTF from the internet just once, and then just create copies of it from that cached copy inside the MRE. If you're going to have just a single copy, the create from GLTF is just as good. But if you're going to be creating a bunch of copies of the GLTF, using that load GLTF and create from prefab combo is a good bit more efficient. All right, create primitive, the next one. That's a lot like the geometrics in the World Editor, for those of you that have played with that. It has real basic things, a box, a sphere, a capsule, things like that. You can create it in the call itself. You create it, and it just has a default texture. We'll be getting into more of textures and things like that next week. But you can bring in your own texture and apply it as well to your primitives, or you can apply the texture to a material and the material to the primitive, I guess I should say. The create there, it's for those of you that have used Unity, that's really the best way to think of this one. That's basically an empty game object when you basically create one, and the idea is to put other things inside of it. That's one of the main uses for it. It's just that straight create. The other one is good for text. There is to create text. It's a little bit different from any of these other methods. You can actually call a text attribute for any of them, but the catch is it deletes the object and replaces it with text. So it's just calling a simple create where it's empty and then making the text is really a good way to move forward there. All right, so this is a quick review from last week. I just wanted to remind everybody where we are. What we're about to talk about is the users joining and things you can do there. So if you look at this area I have here, the user joined for Dargon and the user joined for Scourge down here. Those are the messages that go from the server to the MRE app to let you know that a user's joined. Just wanted to kind of remind you of this since it's been a week since we looked at it. And then again, another thing to notice here is that it tells you who joined in particular. So Dargon versus Scourge joining and so on. So that'll be important in what we're about to show here. So next thing I'm going to do is go into my editor and do a live edit of the code. So that's not the right one. There we go. So this is the code as we left it last week. Just a quick overview. You import the library, have a kit item, store the hello world that comes in. You need an asset container. In your constructor, again, that's the thing that's called just as the MRE starts up. Have it on started that says to call function this dot started. That's this function here. That one actually creates the asset container given the context. And then it calls create from library to create that kit item, which was that fancy hello world that we saw last week. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do something when a user joins and something that we can see here. So the next thing I do, just like with the on started here, I need to provide a function to be called when that on user joined function or signal is sent. So it's very similar to the one here. You start out with this, meaning the current object, the current MRE. It's in the context. So context on user joined. So this is a function that we're calling to set up what's going to happen when a user joins. So in this case, it's going to be similar to the one above. But if you remember from that previous slide, it tells us which user joined. That shows up as a parameter that comes in. To do that in here, inside these little parentheses, you put that parameter. So I'm going to say that parameter, I'm just going to call it user. Then the thing to do when the signal comes is pass in the user. So again, that line is very similar to the one above it. This one sets up on started to call this started function. This one, when a user joined, it's going to call this user join function. Now it's got that red underline because I haven't defined the function yet. As soon as I go down and define the function, that will disappear. But that's the basic structure for what's going to happen when a user joins. So I'm going to come down here to the bottom and just going to say user joined. So we're going to declare a private function again. This time I think I called it user joined. I did. user joined, and it takes that single parameter of a user, which is an MRE.user. All right, so let's have this one. I don't know why this indented like this. I'm going to get up a little. All right, so what we're going to do here, we're going to basically log something to the screen instead of doing anything visually in Altspace. This is useful for debugging. A lot of times you just want to print something to say, hey, I want to know that I got to this point in the code. The way you can do that in Node.js is with this console object .log, and now I'm going to pass it a string. Going to be a kind of a fancy string here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a back quote, which is on your keyboard. I know none of you can, well, those of you 2D can see your keyboard. It's the one above the tab. It's the back quote. And what that does is let us put in some variables inside of the string that'll automatically get added to the string. So in here, I'm going to use that syntax. I'm going to use $, and then this open thing. I'm going to say user dot, and then I want to print the name of the user. I'm going to say user.name joined. That's what I'll do for that function. So again, it means it's going to print something to that command line screen where I'm going to do that npm start in a minute that you see. And then what it's going to print with the back quote, it's going to look for this $sign with these curly braces. And wherever it sees that, it's going to take whatever expressions in there and replace it. So in this case, it's going to take that user, the .name inside of it, and say that they joined. All right. What I'll do now is, which this is where I'm running it on the screen there. So I'm going to do npm run build to compile it. I hope I have the right one set up here. And this server is unfortunately a bit slow, so give it a second here. Now I'm going to type npm start. Now before I hit enter, all of us are in our headsets are pinging the MRE here that's off to your left. We're constantly pinging it to see if it has any type of connection for us. There's nothing running right now, which is why it's showing up like that. When I hit the enter key here and it starts up, it's gonna, of course, all of a sudden allow us to connect to it. And what'll happen then is everything will come down to us and we'll each try to start joining it. So even though we're already all in the world, we're going to be joining the MRE and we'll see the name appear here. So once this starts up, and it takes a second to do that as well. And maybe I have the wrong one set up. Apple reject. Well, that shouldn't have happened. Let me try it again. It may be because so many of us tried to hit it at once here. I try it, npm start again. Right, I think we're going. All right, so live edited that code. We're going to continue and see how far we can get. Hopefully, I won't crash again, but we'll just do what we can do here. All right. So the next slide here, the slides look like they're frozen to me. Are you guys seeing sample MRE attach vectors to users? There we go. There we go. Okay. All right. So the next thing I was going to talk about is, a typical thing you might want to do when users join is attach an object to them. And, attachments is one of the most fun things you can do with MREs anyway. It's a pretty common use for them. So fortunately, rather than live editing the code, I've actually have the code in the screen right here to kind of talk you guys through what we do here. So see here, we're inside, in this case, it's user joins routine again. So this is when users are joining, not when it started. Now I've picked out just that function for this one. So we could load it up big enough you could see it, but of course the rest of the code is still there. It's just all above it at this point. So here's the console.log that we were doing before, where we print the username when people join. And then here we have another create from library. So now this one, if you were here that first week when I brought in those mules and everybody got a mule, that's what this code is here. So it's create from library. So I had that mule as a kid item in my library. You still pass with that context parameter. You still have that resource ID, although I changed it to the ID of the mule instead of that hello that shows up. And then this is the new part here, the actor bit here. What this is, it's as you call this function, there's an optional parameter where you can kind of adjust parameters of the actor. In this case, what I wanted to do was make it an attachment. So the actor, I said, make it an attachment. And the attach point was the hips. So that's why the mule ended up underneath us. And then when you call it, you have to tell who to attach it to. It's this user ID parameter. And this user.id. So this is that user that came in. I used user.name up here. Of course, in computers, it always works with IDs, numbers, things like that. So you have this user ID that you end up passing in to this create from library function. So what this one ends up doing is when a user joins, it creates from the library, so a kit item. In this case, this magic number is that mule. And then the extra parameter, the attachment, we're going to make it an attachment, attach it to the hips of that particular user. So that's in a nutshell, and I'm not going to try running the MRE this time. You saw it a couple of weeks ago, and that seems to, I don't know if that's what's caused the problems, but I'm trying to keep it really simple for the rest of the day, at least today, for the time we got left here. But that's kind of what we're going with, we have here. So we have the hips and the user ID. What I want to do is kind of show you where you can find more info on this actor here and kind of walk you through it. So see if my browser shows. Good, it is. This is what I showed you, the categorization of the Altspace API. I showed you this that first week. Or no, actually, I think it was last week. So we know we're working with actors here. So we're going to look in this actor category. And if you remember from the code, I'll pop it up real quickly here. I don't know if you can see it, but it's actor.create from library. So what I'm going to do here is go to the actor. It's going to bring up a link here. I can click on it and go right to the Altspace documentation for it. So I'm going to make this bigger so people can see it. All right, so we had actor and then we had create from library. So if you look down here, and of course I knew where it was, that's how I got it to get more information out in parameters. And you see, we're going to switch back and forth quickly here. We see the context, which is one of the items passed in, that context. The other one, oops, not that one. here, the browser, that's what I was doing. It shows you this options parameter that is the curly brace. You see the resource ID, we used that already. Then the actor. The question mark here means it's optional. You see the resource ID, it doesn't have a question mark. If you're going to call this create from library function, you have to have that resource ID is what that means. The actor means it's an optional one. If you remember the first time we called it, when we created that hello world, we didn't include it. So we were able to create it without customizing the actor beyond what happened when we created in Unity. But in this case, that question mark means it's an optional parameter. We're going to actually use it this time. That partial, don't worry about that so much. That means basically the parameters in this are optional. But actor-like, so that's kind of the type of the parameter here. If we go back here, you see we've got this attachment, attach point, and so on. And I'm going to click on this actor-like, and this is basically the types of things that you can customize in an actor. In case you can't see it, oops, that made it too big. These are the types of things. So this attachment is the thing we went for. I click on that. You see there's a lot of digging down here, partial attachment like. Click into there. And we see there's that attach point and the user ID, the two that we used inside here. The attach point and the user ID. If we say, wonder, okay, what other attach points can I have? We can click on that. It gives you this attach point property. And then here we go. So this is everything you could potentially attach it to, which is, probably a lot more than you thought of. Some of the more interesting things, in addition to hips, you see left low leg, left foot. It's really interesting considering we don't have feet or legs anymore. We still have them as attach points potentially. But we do have head. That's where the hats go, for instance. We did hips for our mule. There we go. And see quite a few things here. I've used a handful of these. Sometime, there was one time, for instance, I was trying to get something to happen. Just as somebody's head went below a particular plane, I'm trying to switch the effect to make it look underwater. So I wanted to know when somebody's eyes went under my water surface. So I used, here it is, center eye for that one. That's where I put my attachment to tell if somebody had gone underwater. So you see there are quite a few here. So I'm going to click backwards a few times. And we're back here to the actor-like. So this is basically everything you could put in this right here. There are quite a few here. If you remember at the beginning of the course, one of the things I wanted to do here was really kind of help everybody figure out where to look for things as opposed to go through everything exhaustively. I'm not going to go through everything exhaustively here, but this is where you can go to look at the various things you can, and these are all clickable, so you can go into them a little bit more. The attachment is a really common one. We're going to go over the transform in a minute here. I'm going to leave this screen up, but the transform is another very common one that's used. So we're going to go ahead and continue with the slide presentation at this point and go from there. So again, I'm not going to run this, but this is the one that attached the mules to the hips and so on. Now there's a catch with all this. Attachments, you have to do your own housekeeping. You remember when we all had the mules, if somebody left the world, their mule that we created would not automatically go away, even though it was attached to them. It would hang around. So what we need to be able to do is keep track of which attachments are attached to which users and be able to clean that up at the end. And that's basically what this slide is saying. So when the users join, we need some way of tracking all the items that are created and attached to users so we can do the appropriate cleanup when the user leaves the world. So it's commonly used, this is what you see in all the alt space examples, and it's what I've always used for this, is what's called a map data structure in TypeScript. What a map does is it's a way of associating two values together. You can think of it as kind of like a dictionary. That's what it's called in other languages at times. So what you have is a key over here, And that's kind of your lookup value. And then a value, that's something that's associated with the key. So again, the maps associate a key with a value, and they provide a way to look up the value given a particular key. So in particular, when we use it here, since when the user leaves, we know the user ID, we tend to use a user or of some sort for the key, and the value being the attachments that are attached to them. Now, there can be only one value associated with the key. Now, the catch is that value, it could be a structure that contains multiple values inside of it. That's pretty common. It could be an array if you've got a bunch of things attached to them. But when you look up a key, you're going to get a single value back, although it could be a complex one. So that's something to keep in mind. If we had, say, two attachments, one for the head and one for the hips, if we tried associating the head with the user and then the hips with the user, the second one would overwrite the first and we'd lose it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and step through this one. We're kind of running out of time for the day, unfortunately, so we'll have to pick up on this one next time as well. But I'm going to go ahead and step through this one, and I do have the code already created, and hopefully everybody can stick around. If not, it'll be recorded, and you can look at it on YouTube later. But I'm going to step through how to clean up actors as people leave before we finish for the day here. So this is again the MRE flow. What I'm calling your attention to this time are the user left actions. So when the user leaves, you see we had kind of this cleanup for Dargon and cleanup for Scourge as we were both leaving here. In this case, what we're actually wanting to do, the cleanup involves deleting the actors, the mules, if we had started in this case, as people leave. And you see that happens as the people disconnect. So what I'm going to do here is that's going to be, here we go, pull this up. I'm going to pull the code here really quickly here. Now, as you guys are going through this a little later, just kind of give you a hint as what I'm doing here. TypeScript supports two types of comments, this with the / and all the way to the end slash. And it also does this / all the way to the end. As I'm editing these files, I have them kind of build on each other. This / followed by a bunch of equals, that's setting aside a section where I've added something to the previous version of the code. So as I'm going through it now, I'm just going to go focus on those areas. And as you're reviewing it, that's what you can focus on to see, okay, what's changed between this version and the previous version. So, okay, so the first thing we need to do is, again, we got to create that map that I just talked about. The map has, if you remember, a key and a value. This syntax here is describing what's the type of the key and what's the type of the value. What we're going to do here is use an MRE.GUID, that GUID, it stands for Global Unique Identifier. There's a way of getting that ID. If you remember when we used looked at the code previously, we had user.id. That's this MRE.GUID type. So that GUID is basically going to be that user ID. We use the user ID instead of the user because it's a bit more efficient for the map lookups. I'm kind of a stickler for efficiency because of my background. You could actually use MRE.user there and it would work just as well. And then we're going to associate the actor with it. So the actor, if you remember, is what we create. So when we create the attachment, the type of it is an actor here. So what this is, it's declaring a private variable for our little structure called attachments. And we're just creating a map right away. So we're creating a new map from, it's going to be again, the user.id to the attachment. The parens here are necessary because we're calling a new function here. That says create a new one and assign it to the attachments here. So, okay, at this point, we've declared our map here called attachments. So we're going to use to store all those users and IDs. All right, the next thing we need to do is set up that user left callback, just like we did for the on user joined. Remember, it took a user, we set up a function to be called when that happens. We need to do the same thing when the MRE receives that user left message. So you see the syntax here is almost exactly the same. So that this dot context, the only difference here is instead of on user join, you have on user left at this point. It still takes that user for a parameter. We're going to pass that parameter to the function user left at the bottom here. All right, so the next thing we're going to do, we're going to step down here. You see the started function. We didn't change anything in there. I don't have any of these double slashes with the equal signs here. And I'm going to go down to the user joined here, and this is where we need to do something a little different here. So what we've changed here, so this function call was already here to create the mule in this case that was attached to everybody. Well, this time we actually need to save that and store it off somewhere associated with the user. So we're going to create a variable called attachment because that's going to be attached to the user here. Set that equal to the return value from that. So the attachment type, if I hover over to here, now it says any here because I'm not in that there, but it's the return type is actually MRE.actor. So that goes into attachment. And then this is where we associate it. So this is our attachments array, or I should say map here. The way you add key value pairing to it is with this .set function. So this .attachments, which again is that value which just created, .set, we're going to use the user.id. And again, we could have said user there and had a slightly different type, but this is more efficient as the reason I do it here. And then the attachment that we returned up here. So that adds it to that map as it's being created for everybody. So now as everybody's joining, not only do they get a mule inside that data structure that we created, that map, we've created an association between the user and the mule that we can use later on to look it up based off the user ID. All right, so coming down here, so here we get to that user left function. So user leaves, we need to remove the attachment from them and destroy it. So when the user, so we got the user left, takes that user parameter. So one of the things here, sometimes people can leave without an attachment assigned to them. That wouldn't really be something that happened here since we attach a mule to everybody, but it's still kind of good practice to kind of do this if statement here. What this one is, so that's that attachments map here. We're going to check if it has a user ID in it. If it doesn't, it's just going to skip all this code and return. There's nothing to do. In this case, it's always going to have it because we attach the mule to everybody. So we're going to set that, we're going to create a new variable called attachment. Go to that attachments map that we use, and this time called get. Know it exists, so it's safe to call get with the user ID. That's going to return that value type associated with it. So you're going to get that attachment back. The actor that's attachment. And now I'm going to go here, and actually I'm going to go back and show you how to get to this detach and destroy here. But this is, so this attachment is an actor again. I'm going to come back here. It's an actor. So I'm going to go to that page. And we're going to look at the various functions down here. So the detach, if we look at that, we're going to say if it's attached to a user, detach from it. So this is for attachments. That's how you detach it from the user. So the attachment, we detach it. We don't have to supply the user because it can be attached to just one. It knows which ones it's attached to. And then we're going to call destroy on it. What that does, I'm going to go ahead and back up here and go to the destroy. And that destroys the actor. So if we detach it from the user, it's still hanging around. It's just not attached to them. It's actually still seems to be, due to a bug, it seems to be following them around, but it's not associated with them anymore. This attachment.destroy is how you actually remove it and get it out of everybody's headset. So after this code's executed, a user has his attachment removed from, and then the attachment's destroyed. So that mule that was attached to him is destroyed, but everybody else is still around. The other thing we want to do is clean up that attachments map. Just because we got attachment from it, if there's still that user ID and that attachment associated with them in there, we don't need that anymore. So what we're going to do is delete an attachment's user ID or the user based off his ID. And that will do the proper cleanup when somebody leaves to detach the object from the user, destroy the object, and then remove it from our array that we're using to track everything. So, all right, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions. Go to the host panel here. Allow hand raises and open it up to any questions people might have. Okay, you got one coming in from Google Hertz here. You're on Megaphone Google.
You're on Megaphone Google. Yes, I was curious if you've done any tests or know if we try to attach something to a non-existent leg, if it throws an error, or if it actually will get attached to where a leg would be.
It does actually get attached to where a leg would be.
So we could sort of add legs that way.
We could, and in fact, there are some MREs out there that will attach. They attach the whole leg at your hip. But yeah, you could really, if you wanted to, kind of customize your leg, your feet, all that, and kind of give yourself something really nice. You could make animated legs, and show yourself walking around. All right, I kicked you off on air for a second there, Google, because I was getting some feedback while you was going on, but I'll put you back on air in case you got a follow up.
Oh, that's all. Thank you.
All right, appreciate it. All right, Lance, you are on air.
Oh wow, that was fast. All right, so I was trying to do my best to pay attention, but I don't know if you mentioned it or something. You talked about something of a library or, items that go into the MRE and stuff. Do we have to post it in a certain place, or if we already have it as a kit item, could we use that item since it's already a kit?
Yeah, the create from library function call. It's called library because they don't want to tie MREs to old space. They want to be able to use them in other areas. But yeah, the create from library uses kit items. So yeah, any kit item you have, you can bring in with that create from library function. All right, that good? You have any other questions, Lance? I'm not hearing Lance anymore. I'll take him off megaphone and go to the next person. And Lance, go ahead and okay. All right, Lance said he doesn't have any more. All right, Lee, you are on air.
Hi, yeah. I came in a little late, but I was wondering if when are you guys going to start a new, season of this? Like, when is your next semester? Like a new semester of this?
Okay. Yeah, right now I'm working on getting through kind of what was originally 5 classes, although we're going to have to cut this one unfortunately short again because I had significant problems at the beginning of the period. So I'm working on that, and I'm getting a feel for how much time of my free time it's taking, to be honest. And I'll probably do a second one at some point, but I know I'm going to need a break between them as well.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, Aaron, you are on air.
Sorry, had to switch that off. Dargan, I would just like to say, I know it's frustrating for you because you're not getting through the material, but for all of us, I'd just like to tell everybody this gives us an opportunity to catch up and learn, because there is a lot to learn. There's deployment methods and Git and everything. So even though I know you feel frustrated, for us, it does give us that opportunity. So, I, for one, am grateful to have the extra time.
Okay, great, great. Well, thank you, Karen. Thank you, Karen. And I'm hoping there's enough from week to week as we're having these problems to keep people interested. So it's right. And Ely, you're on megaphone.
All right, thank you. And I also want to echo that too. I appreciate the slowness of it and the flexibility, and I really appreciate it. And thank you for your time. My question is, and I'm not sure if you've mentioned this before. Sorry if you have, but are you going to be covering, or is it even possible to do something like an on trigger and on exit for like a Kaleido box? Like I know with Unity there's stuff like that. And I was just wondering if that's possible with MREs. Like if they walk in, trigger something, and then they leave, and then it'll trigger something when they leave the spot.
It is possible, and yeah, I've used it pretty extensively in one of my worlds. I'm going to try to work that in the 5 weeks. If nothing else, I don't know if you've been in these before, but we do in the Altspace MRE Discord. We have an Intro to MREs channel where we can be talking as well and kind of sharing info there. But yeah, there is in fact a way to set up a trigger box, a trigger collider, and then get notifications when actors MREs have created go into them. And there's a little bit more to it than that because users are not actors, so you have to attach something to the user. So it's involved, but it can be done. So.
Oh, awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, great, great. All right, thank you. And I guess I should have mentioned this up front, but for those of you watching on the live stream, you can type questions in the live stream there, and they will be relayed to us. I'm not seeing any of those quite yet. But do feel free to do that as well. I'm going to give that a little more time. I'm not seeing any other hand raises right now. Okay, so I'm seeing a message that says there haven't been any questions on the live stream. All right. Well, at that point, I'm going to go back to the slides, and I'll just talk to the next one. I'm going to, we'll start here next time, but I do want to kind of point out here something else that I'm going to be sharing with you. And I'll be posting all the slides. I'm not going to cut them up into pieces. I'll be posting all the slides so you can look at it if you want going through. But, a pretty common library bug for attachments is these late joiner things where, if you've ever been to any of the parties, you go in and somebody's talking about people's wings and you can't see the wings, or vice versa, something like that. The attachments are there for some people, but not for others. That's due to a synchronization bug in the MRE library. I've found a way that, I kind of hedge my bets here. It seems to work. I've never really done a super stress test to know if it's perfect or if it just severely reduces a problem. But I found a way to do it that involves, and you see here, detaching and attaching every attachment when a user joins a world. That's if you think of something like the Neverland play or Little Red and the Bandits or the Agrabah that's coming up, when you have a bunch of people entering a world at the same time, or it could just be somebody traveling via portal, that's not going to be efficient because if you have 30 people entering the world at once, you don't need to do that 30 times, which is what would happen if you just did it and user joined. So what I've done additionally is kind of worked out a way to do it a bit more efficiently. And I'll just leave that as a teaser, and we'll get into what that is next week and kind of talk about how to use that. So, all right, let's see. I'm seeing one message on my host panel here. See if it's a hand raise. Okay, I do have a hand raise here. So, Dragoness.
Yeah, hi. Okay, I have a question from online. Is
Okay.
there a chance for any lessons where you can go through step by step for the SDK documents?
Step by step through the SDK documents. Okay, I can take some time to do that, maybe on a separate session. What I tend to do is start from this categorization, and I've posted this in the Intro to MREs channel in the MRE Discord. A link to this if everybody can go to. But really, it's just kind of stepping through it. The official Altspace documentation is pretty dry. You get a list of function names, but you see, you get very little here. It's not well documented. So unfortunately, a lot of this is going to be making guesses from the names of the functions, the names of the parameters, and things like that. But I will step through, and like I said, primarily I'll step through this, although you can certainly, once you get used to it, start from the main MRE page. Trying to get up to the top here. All right. Any other questions? And I know the live stream has a 30-second delay, which is why I'm waiting here and desperately need that Jeopardy music MRE. But all right, I'm not seeing any more questions, and I think it's been 30 seconds. Give the live streamers a chance. All right, well, thank you everybody for coming today. We'll get through this one way or another, even if it's in these smaller bite-sized chunks. I know having too much thrown at you makes it difficult anyway. That's why I kind of kept these to an hour, and I kind of go through a combination of slides and code as well. It's easy to just throw way too much at people when you're doing strictly slides. I've taught coding classes before and completely lost people when I do everything with slides, but that's why I kind of force myself to slow down by going back and forth to code as well. So as painful as this web projector can be, it's very helpful in those terms to be able to do that. So. All right, well, thanks everybody. We'll go ahead and keep the one on from next week. We'll start where we got stopped here and keep going. Have a great rest of your day, everybody, and I'll see you in a week, if not sooner.
I missed
Hello.
you.
You just popped right in front of my face. I'm like, hello.
Oh, I'm sorry. I totally put it down.
I did that actually.